myself as a woman, okay, as a woman and as a human being who values life of myself and lives of others as nothing else in the world. I think life is a gift. It's a journey. And from that point, I really want my life to direct me even further where I'm going and how I can help people to appreciate, improve, and live this life to the fullest. And that's how I started my own company called Papaya Stories, that I'm going to tell you about in a moment, and how we incorporate interactive arts, how it's our bloodline of what we're doing and how we're trying to make the positive change. But if I come from the perspective of time, since I was a little girl, I was always passionate about home theater. I was always in performing arts. I finished musical school and I was singing on stage, and arts was the only way I could understand that I'm actually living my life. Of course, playing with friends, but it was just, as consuming water on a daily basis. But then suddenly I got faced by my own fears and expectations. And it took me a while to understand that I can live beyond some traumatic experiences that happened in my life. And I was so happy to come to New Zealand and start my fresh life perspective here and understanding that my gift is to bring joy and love to the world through arts, through creating immersive, interactive, very funky or crazy experiences, or very calming and peaceful experiences. But arts is everything. I agree with Fiona said, that I can see the art form in everything. And I think that's what mindful practices teach us as well, is just to see beyond what's there. And I, for example, questioned what would happen to the world if we didn't speak our language, but we spoke only body language or dance movement language. Imagine how we would go through conflicts or these times. It's beautiful things to think about, what our bodies and energies are capable of. But back to Papaya Stories. It's a hub of inspiration and social enterprise that stands for well-being and mental health. And we focus on bringing that seed of life in every human being, that seed of papaya that each of us has. It's just sometimes traumas, some cultural stereotypes, some self-beliefs block us to feel alive, to feel joy, to be ourselves. And through our practices, events, experiences, spaces that we create in public environments, we try to encourage this organic evolution. And it's really beautiful to see when a person comes in and says that they don't want to dance or they don't want to do anything, and then organically they start to co-create the experience and become a part of that artistic expression, which I think is great. One of our key projects that really supports the idea of interactive arts is called Silent Disco City Walk. I'm just going to show you a logo, how it looks like. It's a cheeky monkey wearing headphones. Cheeky monkey stands for a sense of inner child that is widely awakened when you go on this walk. And it's called Silent Disco City Walk. And of course, you might think silent disco, so it's music in your ears, which is partly true. But in a bigger sense, it's more than that, because it's a site-specific audio program that I write or co-write with other comedians or writers, but mostly create myself with just bits of beautiful interaction. So imagine you putting the headphones and you will hear the voice of a narrator that can be Darth Vader from Star Wars to a dialogue between Miss Past and Miss Future, to love talking to you and taking you on a journey. So it's a very immersive experience, a bit of a new way of seeing theater outdoors. Basically, the voice guides you through the city, paying attention to new places you've never been, to hidden gems, to local businesses introducing their story, and then surprise, there is a pop-up act that can be a circus acrobat, a fashion star, a dance battle, a parkour athletes, whatever our fantasies and theme of the story takes us to, we generated and blended all together. So it's more than just music. It's more like a city adventure that transforms the city into something completely new. And there was one of the key ideas that went into it, which is very special. And from that project, we evolved doing a lot of audio production and audio storytelling, working with lots of artists who, even in COVID world, didn't have the platform of theater as such, like stage to perform. And we would suggest collaborating with them, bringing their story or whatever performance they would like to perform, and adding those pieces together, which is a beautiful way to work together and thrive, I suppose. And just giving more and more a sense of these new experiences, because I actually wanted to touch base on how interactive like arts are not hugely funded in New Zealand. It's really hard to get funding for arts. So I'm really happy for Joanne to get some substantial funding. While in my country, in Russia, there's no funding in general, as you can imagine the situation of corruption. But people always support arts. So community itself in Russia understands the value of art so much because it's the only way where people can express their voices freely. And in expressing your voice, I also wanted to talk about the recent project we got the award for, which is related to Maori storytelling. So this is a very special project that is dear to my heart. So we were co-writing and co-creating the story based on indigenous culture of Maori people and the stories of the land, and then transforming that story into the modern language, making it accessible to non-Maori people so they can connect to the land and to the place as well through the audio story, and again, headphones and some performing arts acts that happened on the way. And saying that, I also wanted to give you an example of the recent project we did between lockdowns called Secret Party Quest, which might inspire you, as it combines the idea of outdoor theater and game, and also indoor arts. So the idea is that people show up on a space, like on the map, and then they will be given some clues. So as they go, they're figuring out where the final destination for fun is going to be. And as they go and figuring out the clues, there are lots of actors showing up the scene, throwing a dialogue in the middle of the street. So they need to read between the lines what's the next clue is. So it was a fantastic idea that I can't wait to grow further, as it gives another platform for people to enjoy it. Coming back to the community development, I wanted to say that Papaya Stories started as the project of my soul and translating the message that I was telling you about mental health and spiritual health. And I think this is the arts, the storytelling, the healing, psychological aspects, they help me to create and co-create events that organically get lots of people together who are no foreign to human values. Like we all want to be loved and feel loved. And I know that when we host an event, this is the most important thing for us, is for people to feel safe and feel loved and feel free to express themselves. And that's why we don't have a community as such as there is just only women from 20 to 40 years old. We have amazing diverse community from 5 to 80 years old who come experience the present moment, share love with one another, feel elevated by one another, and all what unites us is actually just the desire to bring more of these things alive, because each of us as a kid, we always have this childish or not childish part of ourselves that needs to be nurtured. There's always an adult and parent that needs to be nurtured. And I think this is the base for our community development. People come for an experience and then they will share the experience about our event with another friend, and that's how it organically grows. And I felt extremely supported, like Papaya Stories felt extremely supported through COVID times, because we knew we just have each other, and it's pretty powerful. So that's probably me by now, and I went over the timeline, so apologies for that, Denise.
It's the nature of community development. The lines that we draw in the sand, we often rub out and start again and draw a new one, because we don't colour inside the lines very well. Speaking for myself anyway. Thanks, Yana. That really echoed a lot of what I heard people introduce themselves with too, perhaps particularly you, Anne. I wonder if anyone's got any thoughts or questions for Yana, and we'll go to Fiona and then open the floor for sharing all sorts of things. Any thoughts or questions for Yana?
Just really wonderful. I've just been checking out your websites. So many fantastic activities and ideas. I love the silent disco. I think that's so much fun, and I like the support local event with the big orange book, the great stories about local businesses. So much fun.
Right. Thank you so much, Ellen. It's really hard to, I was telling before, it's really hard to kind of juice up what we're doing because the projects are very diverse. And there are so many issues that we can tackle. So thank you for checking the website so you can grasp on things that we're doing as well. Thank you for kind words.
It's fantastic.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ellen. I agree. And sometimes in community development, it's like a rod for our backs. And if we can add some fun, it just transforms so much of it, right? Any other thoughts or questions for Yana before we move on to Fiona?
Well, I can say that I look forward to collaborating and expanding the joy overseas. So who knows what's going to happen. So just opening another door to tell you that. Wink, wink.
Good businesswoman stuff too there, Yana. Fiona, do you want to pick up the Rako, the piece, and tell us a bit about you? Because there's some overlap there, I sense, probably.
I think you're right. So for those of you who don't know me, art is everything I do. I do graphic harvesting and I love drawing. I've always done that. But what many people don't know is that I spent quite a lot of time in musical theatre and production management. And from the time I was 12, so I was introduced to it through school, and we had a great performing arts department. We also had it was a feeder group to an amateur theatre company in Victoria. And so you got this step-up approach into, you might perform in a school production, but you could also assist with the amateur production that was going on. And that could be anything. And the thing that strikes me now is that those conversations and those opportunities that were afforded to me when I was that young were so vital to part of who I am in community and how I approach community development through creativity. I've always seen that people have their own skills and gifts, and it's about finding the right space for people to come through and have a tribe. One of the production companies that I was a producer for, Three Big Men Productions. We did some amazing plays and musicals, but one that comes to mind is a musical called Working, and we actually partnered then with Beyond Blue and a few other, Lighthouse Foundation, a few other organisations, and we used the platform of the production with permission to add in the stories and the statistics and the links for people who were going through different things, because the production itself was about, you know, 18 different characters and them in their worlds, but where the crossover is and how they came together. And I think in that instance, it not only told a story to the audience and gave them information and connection, the group of people that I've worked with, we are still very, very tight. We are extremely tight in everything that we do. We connect all the time. We see opportunities to bring other people into the space and broaden it again. And I think my theatre world is a hope. It's helping other possibilities emerge. It is there. And I think it's because of heart. And if you look at the word heart, you have art. And then at the beginning, you have the H and the E. And there, you know, I just think of that as the missing in the middle, helping and emerge. It just gives me that feeling. I've seen some beautiful people come through our children's links with Catchment Kids, with a lot of the productions we did with Little Theatres, with people moving on through to WAPA and NIDA and all of those things. I now see theatre shows and go, oh, I remember that child when that child was terrible, like seriously, really, really bad. But we nurtured that and we grew that. I've seen a lot of costume designers, I've seen lighting and audio designers come through, and no matter where I go, I can see someone's name that is part of my tribe of theatre, and the support that connects in with that, growing the sense of a community within the community of what theatre does. From everyone involved, my mechs and techs, I cannot thank. I always just am blown away the generosity of a lot of the people that work in theatre and what they bring to the table with creativity. And also, it's the go with the flow. Let's have a go. Let's try. Let's see what it looks like. Let's take that next step. You know, we took a great chance with Working and taking it away from what it was originally written for. Excuse me, there's a bird and a dog behind me having an argument. We took a really big chance on the theatre community saying a poo-poo to us in using the platform to tell social stories, because a lot of people didn't see that as being in its own form. It was taken outside the realm and it was used as a different tool. But if we can't use the tools that are available to us to build community and share social connection and tell bigger stories and spread the word to people, where do we do that? Do we rely on media? Do we rely on that? So the expression that comes out of performance for me, I can honestly say there's different performers, and I know that when I go in, I know what I'm going to get, and I'm going to be heartfelt. I think there's a production that, if you haven't seen it, I know Michelle's seen it. There's a theatre production called Come From Away. And Come From Away is one of the best community development stories you will ever find. It is sung through, and it is from when 9/11 hit, and that little town that did everything for the people that were stranded in planes, and how that community came together. And that's just how I see community. So that particular production, Come From Away, tells you how people who had their own little skills may not have had lots of money, but they pitched in, and how there was racism, but they overcame that, how there was stigma, we overcame this, and how we just learnt to listen and actually get on board and do all of that work, and how that very small community on the edge of nowhere changed the lives of so many people. So that production is something, if you can ever see it, go and see Come From Away. I take something from every production I see or do. It's just how I am, because it's heart. It is heart. It is that helping other people, hoping other possibilities emerge in community, and it's art. And that's what I believe in everything. cannot tell you how much I rely on art and creativity in everything I do. I don't have a big website. I have lots of stories, and I have lots of tools and lots of collected things that we can use in creativity. I can do anything in a park, you know, it's just the way I've always been, but I don't need it because I have people, and I have people who come with that opportunity and that open mind to try something different. And I thoroughly enjoy all of those things, especially when I do a lot of work with community neighbourhood houses and men's sheds and, you know, little markets. We set up my ukulele players who were all over the age of 80, who played at a market and busked and brought so much joy to that community. They all have their own stories. One's a politician, you know, one's a politician, but they have this little group and they meet and they talk and have coffee, and they just turned up at a market to play and bring joy to people. How can you not be happy with that outcome? How do you measure that? Smiles. I can't put a data on that, on measuring community development and art, but I know that I can actually say that is qualitative stuff that goes on. And I'd love to know how many younger people have gone and picked up a ukulele because of what they'd seen at that time. But that's my brain of, okay, how can I further this story? But sometimes we have to go, you know what, that's okay, stop. You have just done this, and that was the experience, and nothing else has to come from that, just the joy of performance and what it can bring and tell people, and in all of its iterances. So peace back. And you're all going to see Come From Away I See. Excellent.
Joanne's, I'm not Joanne, Yana's booking us tickets, I believe. Alex, do you want to see it again?
Yeah, we booked actually. We booked it later this year in August. Yeah, it's a wonderful story, and I think it's that thing about windows and mirrors. And if we don't tell our own stories, who is going to tell them? Because you can go down the QAnon story bit, or you can actually have stories that are linked to your local community that just provide those windows and mirrors that I think we all need, that are not provided in the media.
So true. So very true.
Totally agree, Alex.
Yeah. Any thoughts or questions for Fiona directly around what she's just said? So much in there, Fiona, both about communicating community development, if you like, and growing it, you know, your tribe, and all sorts of nuances in there. And the measurement, Alex, we might come back to that, or the communication of value perhaps might be. Anyway, that's a whole conversation, isn't it? Any thoughts or questions for Fiona?
Just a, I suppose it's a question for Fiona. Thinking about all the stuff that you've done in disaster spaces, and I'm probably this is top of mind at the moment with everything that's happening in Australia, is can you share why art is important in that disaster recovery space from your experience, and some of the great outcomes? Because I know I could tell some of your stories, but I think it would be great to hear how useful it is in helping people deal with what's going on around them.
Thanks. And Michelle knows I'm not good at putting my own flag up and waving it, so now she's thrown me under the bus. Thanks, Michelle. So for me, the creativity was the neutral platform that brought people together. It connected people. It was gentle. It was kind. It was no outcome driven. It is just a platform that brings like-minded people together, or not. It brings families a space to be safe and experience something together they may not have experienced. It's a platform that in some of the first programs I was doing in one of the spaces was to tell the service agencies, this is not your place to come and do this. You can be here, but you are a participant in the program. This is not for you to start to get out your ticket box sheet and start to try and work out how to fix everybody. But you can be here if you're happy to be a participant in this space. And it neutralised so much, and it allowed grieving. And creative art allows so much in that grieving process and growth. It allows natural connection without things being forced. And I think that for me is one of those keys to recovery, is it's got to come in the time of people and participants. It does not come at the end of a funding round. And I'm very big on stamping that ground. I'm extremely proud of some of the art installations that were created, that are installations that change every year. They are a framework, but they don't stay the same. Now different groups can contribute to that space in the way they like. They may be weaving wire trees, they may be putting cards on something, they may be weaving flowers in a community, it may be adding to a mosaic path. It may be that there's a beautiful community space that has and honours respect for people to be sitting in solitude. And you know, when you come to that space, that is what the creativity did there. And it made everybody aware that that space is not for people to stand and take photos and videos of everybody and capture everyone's stories. That is the grieving space. And you let people emerge through that. I know that automatically, and Michelle will know that this week I think I texted Michelle at one point and said, I'm in recovery. I've gone straight to disaster recovery mode, and then having to come back to what we could and couldn't do, because it's the speed of trust. I know there's things that will happen. I know what people have to go through. I don't know all of their stories. I can't tell you. But the disaster recovery space, it is poignant to have spaces of neutral. It's got to be neutral. It's got to have somewhere for people to use and be tactile. Music, if you get someone might say, I'm going to play guitar that day, sit in the park, sit in the space and play guitar, and other people might pick it up. It's not planning everything to the nth degree, thinking there's going to be an outcome you can tick off against. And it follows heart. It follows heart. I hope that answered your question a bit, Michelle. Thanks.
Alex.
Yeah, I found your comment about the evaluation really interesting, because of course that's Denise and my space, I guess. And I think you've actually answered your own question around evaluation, because what you've described and talked about is all this kind of stuff that evaluation captures. And the purpose of evaluation is reflective practice. So to really understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and how it works and how it can be improved in some way, what works, what doesn't, and so on. And that stuff that you've just talked about. And so I see evaluation as very much storytelling. So you do the creative arts part, and we do the story of the story effectively. And when you are able to capture that, like you just have now, when you're able to capture that and share that, it helps to grow it. And it also helps with funding, and it helps other people see what others, like we're doing today, what other people are trying. So I think that evaluation can actually play a really important role in this kind of field, but it's an interesting role because it's a story about a story, effectively. Yeah.
And I agree, Alex. And one of the things I'm really aware of is I was a naughty girl in one of my programs that was very heavy top down, and I did learning journals. I didn't fill in any data formats. I didn't fill anything in. I did learning journals with photographs and snippets and quotes from people. And then I presented that. And I thought, oh, the department I'm just going to go one way when I report on it. And for 3 years, they let me do it. And I said, if you want all that other stuff, you can pull it out of that stuff. But this is more beneficial to anything you're going to get, is seeing the stories and capturing from people rather than the numbers. So it is a creative environment for capturing it, and I'm always pushing people to go back and talk to whoever their funding body is and say, are you okay if we do it this way? Are you okay if we report to you in a video? Are you okay if we do that? So yeah, I'm glad you're hearing what I'm hearing too, Alex. So, and thank you. Yes, it's definitely what we do. So yeah.
Yeah, more and more there is more and more acceptance of very creative ways of evaluation and assessment and understanding and reflective practice, it seems to me. In the arts, Alex, you were saying that you work with a lot of arts organisations around evaluation, which is one thing, but there's also quite often quite a lot of art and expressive arts in evaluation, or those tools can be used for evaluation. It's a two-way process. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, about your experience with that, or anybody else for that matter. Just a love heart.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, really support what you're saying, Denise. And yes, you know, our evaluations used to look like, you know, 20-page reports that sat on a dusty shelf and then and never went anywhere. And thank God we've moved on from that. And yes, you're right. We use a lot of different tools in evaluation, a lot of graphics, a lot of comic, a lot of, you know, a whole range of things, because the idea is, as you're saying, is to capture that essence and capture all those reflections and in the most appropriate way, whether it's by video, whether it's by, you know, graphics. It doesn't really matter. It's what is going to shift hearts and minds, what is going to grow our understanding of the work that's being undertaken, and how can it really reflect the authentic work of the people that are creating it. And that's why you have that co-creation process and evaluation now. Yeah. And it's just beautiful what you guys are talking about.
I was just going to add to that, one of the things is the long-term legacies that are left in community. That has to still be okay for people. That has to be something that will not send triggers, and it has that contribution to the space can still happen. And that's something that's often forgotten after the initial responding to something as a disaster. Who's going to maintain things later on, and who's going to carry those stories? So very important to have that recorded and reported as well.
And possibly, I don't know if it's even more important, but just as important are these slow-moving disasters, the climate change, the poverty and things like that. And again, Alex, having you in the room reminds me of photo voice as a tool, as a creative, artistic research evaluation, but also community development tool. Can I go back to you and let you talk about how you've used tools like that in your practice?
Are you talking to me?
I am.
Gosh, I feel like I might be. Yeah, so I'll briefly do it, but that's all. So photo voice is massively important, massively, because it's from the point of view of the participants in a project. And so I'm thinking particularly of a group of really gorgeous young people in West Auckland, and they were called the Naughty Boys. And they were locked in their friggin' classroom. They're Form 2, so about 12 years old, 13 years old, and let out at playtime and lunchtime, unlocked the door to let them out. And we did a project with them, which was, we really wanted to understand what it was like living in West Auckland for them in their community. And so we got a photographer who's a National Geographic photographer to teach them photography skills. And we taught them about ethics, and we told them what the project was, where it was going, which was actually to MSD and to local council. And so the whole project took probably about a term, maybe two. And we talked through research practice and so on. And then we got them walking around the community, taking photos of the things that were really important to them or mattered to them or were significant in some way. And, you know, I'll probably cry if I talk about it, but there was a beautiful photo of 4 sets of feet. And one of the boys had huge shoes on, and they the family couldn't afford shoes for him, so he had to have shoes to walk around the community. So the dad had lent his shoes so that child could walk around the community and take photos, and his feet were really sore. And I was terrible about it. I was like, oh gosh, you've got young legs and all the rest of it, because he was moaning about the fact that he was really tired. And then he said, no, I'm really tired because my feet are really sore from the tops of his shoes, you know, lifting up like that. So they took these amazing photos, beautiful photos of train tracks in West Auckland that they didn't know where the trains actually went to. And And then there were about 1,000 photos, and we whittled it down to about 16, I suppose, or 20 that they chose. And then they captioned them all together. And it created this incredibly powerful story to MSD and council about actually through their eyes what it was like to live in this community. And I swear to God, if we'd written a 100-page report, it just would have been filed, but it actually helped to change things in that community in West Auckland. So tools like Photo Voice can be an incredibly powerful way of capturing people's point of view, and particularly of young people. And I think the really wonderful thing about that project is those kids who were supposedly naughty boys locked in a classroom, all those kids, because we've kind of kept in touch with them because they were beautiful boys, have gone on and done really, really well. And I really think that being part of this was a really helpful part of them being involved in other things. They had a community dinner where they showed off these photos. These were kids that finally felt successful. They felt it was something wonderful that they had done, and they could see the influence that they had. And one of our boys was the I don't know, the god of Henderson High, I don't know what you call him these days, prefect, head boy, whatever that was. Yeah, a godlike creature on Henderson High. Yeah, so I think art can change, can change trajectories as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, just sitting here remembering that, and seeing that picture with you. So quite a long time ago now, maybe even 10 years ago. Anyone else got a story they'd like to share? Something to do with Yana? Yeah, come on in.
I would like to continue what Alex was talking about, that art can change, or again with Fiona's story, art can provoke or provide space where you can have uncomfortable conversations. And I was lucky enough to take part in a community-led choir project 2 years ago, probably. I forgot the name of it. Sing It to My Face, it's called, Sing It to My Face. And it's an intergenerational story that I'm also passionate about. As with projects I do, I make sure that we actually can get, as I said, different people, different cultures, different age groups, because that's where the magic happens from my perspective as well. As the only time I can see people dancing or talking and engaging with each other from 5 to 85 can be a birthday party or wedding. So they're not exact strangers, but when you blend strangers together, that's beautiful chemistry. And I was already in a group for mid-age groups. So there were 3 groups in choir, rangatahi, so youth, mid-age group from 25, I think, or 27 to 45, and or 50, excuse me, it doesn't really matter, but 3 groups. And the interesting thing is that there were not enough voices for young people. So we have to pretend that we were young people, which I actually wrote a lot on behalf of young people. And the interesting part that I'm personally also passionate about is to capture the voices. So the lyrics that we were singing out loud were all based on the survey that all participants put together. So there were questions about what is good about Generation X, what is good about baby boomers, what is not good, what do you feel for young people? So basically they blended all the stories together and got the lyrics. And we as representatives of young people, where only actually technically 2 people were falling into that category, the rest of us were much more grown-ups pretending to be young. We have to put 3 songs together. And that was such a cool experience. That's when we are not songwriters, maybe there was just one guy. I love singing and composing, but we all blended in, and it wasn't this is my idea. We were all co-sharing and doing that and singing from our hearts, telling the stories. And it was phenomenal. It was such a healing space, as the way they stage it as well. The youngers would come and disrupt the space. They were 40s against 60s on different corners of town hall. And then youngsters started to make noise from the balconies, including myself. So we would be little gangsters and throwing stuff at them verbally. And the dynamics, like I remember the show was on for 4 nights, and on 3 nights in a row, we were all crying while singing. So we actually understood that we were, through us, we were healing those conversations, and we were inspiring those hard conversations where we actually have so much to say to each other. And it was an amazing experience on Evaluation Point as well, as they created a cool booth where you would come in and ask, like they were asking which generation you belong to and how you'd like to leave a kind of your review. And there were all telephones, you know, with the dial that I remember from my childhood. So you would dial and talk on the phone, or there is like a social media Snapchat filter if you feel like it. So I just thought there are so many cool ways of doing those projects, and it's incredible. I actually feel personally that the measure of success, it's hard to capture it. It's hard to capture because people sometimes become so exposed and vulnerable. They're not ready to share that I was deeply moved. You know, they would say that was great or something like that, because it's just too much to handle. And
the arts can be a wonderful way of bridging those gaps generationally or otherwise, can't they? And I think, Fiona, you said not always like-minded people in disaster spaces, but it's easy, for example, with your story, Yana, for different generations to throw darts at each other. Oh, you know, okay, boomer, or millennials never XYZ, and a whole bunch of, you know, barbs, if you like. But the arts, and that's a lovely story of the bringing together. And I think you were sort of saying that too, Fiona. Devette, Anne, Alan, Joanne, would you like to add to the story? Michelle, how do you use arts in your practice?
I just sense that from my perspective, what I hear when I listen to all the stories is it is the underlying theme is creating a safe space. It is this thing of letting people express their feelings. I was just interested in Yana's concept. It seems to be you use the headphones and so forth as well, but at some stage, surely, that is a communication between me, and I could give expression to myself, my feelings, and me and you, or whoever is involved there. But when is it that you bring the community together? I'm just asking to say, okay, it's at some stage, it must be between people, human beings, and not over the either.
yeah, it's a good question, because you will see probably a lot of people nowadays walking around the city wearing headphones, and they are isolated. They're in their own world. We provide headphones for everyone. So we tune in and there's a program, and there is not only voice that's talking to yourself, but it's actually helps people to relax and not feeling pressure that the spotlight is on them. But it's a group of, tomorrow we're going to have in our post-COVID world, a group of 30 people going together on that adventure. And during the program, you hear some things like spot someone wearing yellow clothes and give them a high five, or whatever happens, or let's do the dance routine dedicated to Michael Jackson. And we all started to jam all together. So people inside the group, they are connecting, but also the magic actually happens to the people outside of the group who watch us and start to connecting to us as well. And that's one of the favorite things that everyone enjoys. So it's not only the connection to yourself, but it's actually connection to others. So through that medium of listening to the audio program in your headphones, you're connecting to another person without saying a word, but being connected by the same soundtrack that you hear. It might hard to understand, but when you experience it, I might share, just give me a moment, I'll share the YouTube link so you can watch it some other time or later today to see how it feels, how the connection happens. If it makes
Great
sense.
answer, Yana. I can see why I'm nervous about coming with Michael Jackson moves involved. But, you know, maybe I should just embrace.
Okay, Denise, you don't know anything about yourself. That's the thing. You don't let your mind think. Let your walk do the talk. So.
Yeah, Joanne can do it, I can do it. But I'm also remembering the Te Aratu, the M2M version, where the narrative might be inside people's ears, but was co-created by Māori, by mana whenua, people who whakapapa to that land, who come from that place, retelling their stories to people who have never heard those stories, some of whom are descendants from those people, and other people might live there. So there's a connection to communities of past stories into place, and the place making, if you like, or the making of place and community now by instilling new knowledges that's been co-created as well. Am I right there, Yana? And you haven't just done that there, you've done that in a number of places. So it's kind of on your own and kind of not. And it's actually through time as much as the people standing beside you. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. It's also like, it depends on how we define community, right? Like the immediate community that is coming to the event to experience that, the community that contributes to the part of the project and gets involved. So it can be creative community, and community, as I said, outside world that actually, you know, harvest only the top of the corn or whatever the fruit and the goodness is coming from. But to give you another example, I think we just like talked about similar things, but we had an event called Magic Photo Booth, which is my personal favorite, and I can't wait to bring it back, as it helps people to travel through time and space to their dream destination. And basically the idea that there was a photo booth set up under the red velvet curtains, like in theater, and people were invited, just strangers were invited to come and travel to one of the countries, and they were given a choice of countries. For example, they decided to go to Cuba. The Cuban music starts to play on the background on the street. And they were invited to go inside the photo booth, where they were greeted by an actor. He wasn't actually an actor, and that's the beauty of the community for me. I just gave the call out, who wants to play Che Guevara? If he can speak proper Latino Spanish, that would be amazing. So when they walked into the photo booth, they were greeted by Che Guevara and giving props, photo props related to that Cuban country, you know, beautiful hats, lots of colors and scarves, and Cuba Libre, I think that's the name of the cocktail. And while they're in the photo booth, in their safe space where it's closed and no one can see what's happening outside, we have dancers. Some of them were professional, most of them were non-professional from specific country. They were coming out. So it was orchestrated and curated. We were rehearsing it, but they would come out and started to dance a traditional Cuban salsa or bachata and bring people from the street in. Again, not like forcing them, but it's just organically happens. So once the experience in the photo booth finished, they walk out and the whole street is dancing. And they definitely feel like they were not in Auckland anymore. And it just kept going. No one wanted to stop. We had like a limit for 3-4 hours, but everyone wanted to keep going. So again, this is the organic way you bring the community from outside world within your community world. And I'm really proud of this project. That was my first community project I did in New Zealand, in Auckland, 2015. I got 45 volunteers who just wanted to dance and represent whether their country or they want to learn a new traditional dance of a different country. Like I myself have to learn Irish dancing, which I thought I will never be able to. And that's another example of bringing community together, I suppose. I don't know, Debette, if it was good enough explanation how this crazy world works with all these creative people. But sometimes it's just the call out, who wants to do this? This is what we're doing. Who wants to do the project? And people just come together, because down we actually miss those experiences.
Absolutely.
And we need more
Anne, can I bring Anne in here? Anne had something that she wanted to add to weave into our conversation.
Yeah, I mean, so history keeps popping up, and I'm finding it more and more. Any community development, arts projects, or anything that I'm working with now, I find it's really fascinating to delve into the history and the way the activities that in the past have cemented community to move forward. Then we've got the current activities, and then we've got, okay, where we're going in the future. And it's really helped in a lot of ways. It's helped also share the stories of the other ones. So I do some research and come up with, I mean, our bookshop here was, it's been there forever and a day, and it started way back in the day that at the time, the Methodist minister, who used to go out to all the stations, and he'll do tens of thousands of kilometres a year visiting them, and he used to take books and magazines and sell them or pass them on to people in the stations. I mean, that was a time when the only way they had communication was two-way radio, if it worked, and if the distance was right, etc. So, you know, and it goes on and on, that story. It's really amazing. So we had the Sisters of St. John of God in Broome, working in orphanages and doing community projects, who acts, and then on the veranda of his home, when he was back in Broome, he also had some was toys, but he had all these books and magazines. So they would get them off of him and pass them on to the people they were working with. And when he moved on, after doing this for quite a few years, they took over the role and set up a little shop. And that went on for years and years and years. And volunteers were involved until eventually a volunteer took it on as a business for that person, and it's still going today. And we're looking at, 50 odd years of, because before that, Broome didn't exist. It was built for the luggers, for the pearl luggers. So so now we can move on and talk about what we're doing now in those areas where we're going. And that's just one example. I mean, there's lots of them. And we have the Shinju Matsuri Festival, which is the Japanese and Chinese starters festival. Now it's everyone. And a lot of them are still involved in the pearl industry, strong Filipinos, families and everything else. And what's really interesting, okay, and Aboriginal people, and there's been intermarriages, and it's quite amazing when you look at some of the families around. So looking, okay, how come here is probably done better multiculturally? If you go back to the terrible days of Australia when they had a white Australia policy, Broome was the only one excluded from that policy in the whole country because of the pearl divers. So there's all these stories that keep popping up everywhere. So I just think the value of looking back to looking current to looking forward is quite significant.
It's a lovely way to sort of begin to wind us up, Anne, and how one thing leads to another, and the interweaving of these things with the arts. So often we don't realize it's community development perhaps, but it's growing our resilience. I get to know you not just because you can sing, but now I know you have, I don't know, fruit trees or whatever. When I was facilitating this, just sitting here, Susie came in to get some banana pups that I cut off last week, to share, and I met Susie through council, and those sorts of things. Through work and through the arts, we get to meet people who are in and of our place and making it forward, as well as hearing what has come before. It's been a fascinating conversation. I think with 8 minutes to go, we'll begin to wrap it up, but I hope we've all sort of learnt something. Joanne is gone. I hope she got some interesting ideas for her project that's well funded in Sandringham, and that we all have as well. Michelle has put in the chat the practice book. That, I don't know if you want to say anything quickly to that, Michelle, or the conference that has been landed squarely in her and I our laps for Darwin next year. Come, let's make it a creative thing. We are looking forward to it, and there's some really interesting early conversations happening already. Michelle, do you want to say a few quick words, and then we'll do a round and close?
Yes, just that the book's available. If you click on that link, it'll take you to the links that IACD members have created. And then, of course, the World Community Development Conference this year is in Georgia. And, you know, our heart goes to that team. There's a lot of struggles at the moment. A lot of them are doing humanitarian work with people coming across the border from Ukraine. So it'd be great to, you know, really support them and get behind it. The conference is going to be 100% online. That had been decided before things eventuated last week, just with fears of COVID and what could potentially happen. And also encouraging people in your networks to join IACD. It's, you know, allows you to come to events like this. For those that want to come to Darwin, you'll also get discounted registration as a member. And there's a whole lot of things that you can get involved in, and a lot of information on the website. So please encourage others. We're trying to build our Oceania family for, you know, to build diversity, but also to create a bit of a community of practice where we can all tap each other on the shoulder and help each other out as we need to. So that's all from me, Denise. And I'm just going to stop the recording as well.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. I